Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is my week 1 Victober video. I'm participating in Victober for the whole month of October and I'm so excited. It's one of my favorite readathons here on BookTube, and so it is hosted by Kate Howe, Katie from Books and Things, and Lucy the Reader. And so thanks all three of you for hosting this great event. And so there are some challenges involved that I am trying to complete, and also I just have a few other books on the side that are related that I want to try and read this month as well. So this video is basically just going to be about what I've read this first week of October related to Victorian literature. And so let's just get right into it. I'm participating in the read-along of Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. I have not read Shirley before. I have read Jane Eyre and absolutely loved it. So I was very much looking forward to getting into Shirley. And I'll confess, I'm having a bit of a hard slog of it, getting into it at first. I'm a little over, I'm about, 126 pages in, and it's all right, but it hasn't totally grabbed me yet. I have noticed a few things though that I will say. So Shirley was written in 1849 and it's set in Yorkshire, but it's set earlier. It's set in 1811, 1812. So I find that interesting that it was written in the Victorian time period, but actually set in the Regency time period. According to the introduction I have, this is the Wordsworth Classics, or potentially it was on the back. This is the Wordsworth Classics edition, and they say that she has a gift for creating memorable characters and for evoking atmosphere. So I wrote that down on where I'm keeping my notes, because I'm going to keep an eye out for that and watch for memorable characters and atmosphere. So right off the top, I have to say that she has a great opening. Shirley, the opening paragraph is fantastic, and so I'm just going to read that to you. Of late years, an abundant shower of curates has fallen upon the north of England. They lie very thick on the hills. Every parish has one or more of them. They are young enough to be very active and ought to be doing a great deal of good. But not of late years are we about to speak. We are going back to the beginning of this century. Late years, present years are dusty, sunburnt, hot, arid. We will evade the noon, forget it in siesta, bypass the midday in slumber, and dream of dawn. So I just think that's a great opening paragraph. And then I had forgotten that Charlotte Bronte likes to address the reader in her novels. She draws the reader right in so that there is no question that it's a story, and that you are invited to join in. So one thing that I like about it is that even though you are kind of hit over the head with the fact that this is a story that you are reading, you are invited to join in and be a part of that story. And so in a sense, you're sort of being held back and yet invited in at the same time. I find that very interesting. She's also very dramatic. There are, in the way that she writes, her descriptions and stuff are very dramatic. And so here's an example of how she addresses the reader and draws you in. If you think from this prelude that anything like a romance is preparing for you, reader, you never were more mistaken. Do you anticipate sentiment and poetry and reverie? Do you expect passion and stimulus and melodrama? Calm your expectations, reduce them to a lowly standard. Something real, cool, and solid lies before you. Something unromantic as Monday morning, when all who have work wake with the consciousness that they must rise and betake themselves thereto. It is not positively affirmed that you shall not have a taste of the exciting, perhaps toward the middle and close of the meal. But it is resolved that the first dish set upon the table shall be one that a Catholic, aye, even an Anglo-Catholic, might eat on Good Friday in Passion Week. It shall be cold lentils and vinegar without oil. It shall be unleavened bread with bitter herbs and no roast lamb. So I love, right from the beginning, she addresses the reader, she draws you in, and then she tempers your expectations of what's going to happen in this story. I found there is a lot written in the Yorkshire dialect that I have a hard time getting used to. I have a hard time reading it and understanding it, and so I'm finding that really slows down my reading. Also, there's a lot of French in here in conversation that there is no translation for. This Wordsworth Classic Edition doesn't offer any footnotes or any translations, and so I don't understand French, and so I have to just skip over that part. Now I am also reading for Katie's challenge, read a Victorian book that equates to your favorite genre. I am reading The Dead Secret by Wilkie Collins. I love Wilkie Collins. He is probably my favorite Victorian author. The Woman in White is in one of my top 5 books of all time. I love The Woman in White. I really love The Moonstone as well. And so I wanted to read another one by Wilkie Collins. And so I've started reading The Dead Secret. I'm about halfway through. This was written in 1857, but like Charlotte Bronte, it's set earlier. So this one is set in Cornwall, and it opens in 1829 on a household that is awaiting the death of its mistress. And she is in her deathbed and calls for her maid. And Sarah the maid comes into the room, and the mistress admits that she tried to tell her secret to her husband and couldn't do it and wants to write it down. And this is where you discover that this maid knows what that secret is and does not think that the mistress should be telling her husband what this secret is. So the mistress manages to write it down, and then she's trying to get Sarah to promise to give this letter to her husband. And so she makes her promise not to destroy it. Then she makes her promise not to take it out of the house, but before she's able to actually get a verbal promise from her to give it to her husband, she dies. And then I'm not going to reveal any more than that because I don't want to give the story away. But then it moves, after the death of the mistress, the story moves 15 years into the future to 1844. There was a daughter who was 5 at the time, and she is married, and they want to move back to the house. And so I'm really enjoying it. I love Wilkie Collins, and I will confess that I have a bit of a tendre for sensational novels, and this definitely counts as a sensational novel. It's written in the 3rd person. It doesn't have the multiple narrators that The Woman in White and The Moonstone have, but I am really enjoying it, and I've marked a few things here that I wanted to share with you. So, I thought this was an interesting way of writing. In some ways, it shares some similarities with Shirley, how the author is drawing you in, but this type of thing doesn't happen very often in this book, and that's why I noticed it. At 7:30 on a certain fine summer morning in the year 1844, if any observant stranger had happened to be standing in some unnoticed corner of the churchyard, and to be looking about him with sharp eyes, he would probably have been the witness of proceedings which might have led him to believe that there was a conspiracy going on in Long Beckley, of which the church was the rallying point, and some of the most respectable inhabitants the principal leaders. And then it continues like that. And then leaving the clerk to return by the village road, the bride, bridegroom, and elderly gentleman turned back by the footpath over the fields, and the visionary stranger of these pages to vanish out of them in any direction that he pleases. Let us follow Dr. Czerny to the vicarage breakfast table and hear what he has to say about his professional exertions of the morning in the familiar atmosphere of his own family circle. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting way of writing and getting into that part of the story. And then this part, I just thought this part was hilarious. And so the landlady and her daughter are having a discussion about some newlyweds who are staying at their house. And because the daughter comes to tell her mother that she has seen the bride sitting on the lap of her husband. And the landlady says, "I won't believe it," exclaimed Mrs. Mowlem indignantly. "A lady like her, with riches and accomplishments and all of that, demean herself like a housemaid with a sweetheart? Don't tell me I won't believe it." So I am very much enjoying The Dead Secret by Wilkie Collins, and I will let you know in the next video what I thought of it when I finish. All right. I've also been reading Detection by Gaslight, 14 Victorian detective stories. And so I've been reading these, just one here or there, kind of as a bit of a palate cleanser. Maybe some of the Victorian books can get a little bit heavy at times, and so I've been enjoying reading short detective stories. The first one that I read was a Sherlock Holmes. It was the Copper Beeches, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. One thing that I like about how this particular edition was put together is there's a little introduction, and then for each story they have a paragraph about the author, and then the story. So The Adventure of the Copper Beeches was published in the June 1892 issue of The Strand as the final stories in the first series of Holmes' adventures. It shows Holmes at his most testy, his most active, and his most contemplative. Doyle often depicted strong women in his stories, and Violet Hunter is one of the most resourceful. And I would agree with that. So Violet Hunter comes to Sherlock and Watson to say she's been offered a job. There's a few weird things about it, and so she wants their advice about whether or not she should take the job. And then the story advances from there. The second short story in here that I've read is called The Case of the Lost Foreigner, and this was written by Arthur Morrison. And I've never read anything by Arthur Morrison, so I found the description in the beginning very helpful. He lived from 1863 to 1945. Arthur Morrison created Martin Hewitt, the most important of Sherlock Holmes's immediate successors, because of the Strand's need to find a fictional detective to replace Doyle's great character. Doyle had tired of Holmes and tried to end his cases by sending him and his arch-enemy, Professor Moriarty, to their deaths at Reichenbach Falls. Arthur Morrison depicted Hewitt as a contrast to Holmes. Instead of being tall and thin with a hawk-like face, Hewitt was a stoutish, clean-shaven man of middle height and of a cheerful, round countenance. Hewitt ascribed his success to the judicious use of ordinary faculties. Though the admiring narrator, a journalist named Brett, in true Watsonian fashion, thinks that the detective's faculties are very extraordinary indeed. This story is taken from the second Hewitt volume, Chronicles of Martin Hewitt, 1895. And it shows Morrison's understated approach to what turns out to be a sensational crime. And I quite enjoyed it, so I would look for more stories by Arthur Morrison. I did quite enjoy it, and I liked the contrast between his detective, Martin Hewitt, and Doyle's detective, Sherlock Holmes. I thought that was interesting. All right, and then for the challenge of read a Victorian diary or collection of letters. This was Lucy's challenge. And so I got for free on my Kindle, hang on one second, it's just waking up, The Letters of Queen Victoria. And I didn't read all of these, I just read a few of the letters here and there. So this is a selection from 1837 to 1837 to 1861 in 3 volumes. And the one that I have is volume number 1, 1837 to 1843. And this collection was published by His Majesty the King in 1901. And so I found this collection of letters and excerpts from her journal really very interesting because they were from the very beginning of her reign. In the preface, they discuss how the letters were chosen, which ones were chosen to be included in this collection. Quote, as would serve to bring out the development of the Queen's character and disposition, and to give typical instances of her methods in dealing with political and social matters. And I thought they did a good job, but I do think when you read letters like this that you need to take into account that they have been curated, you need to look at who curated them, who chose the collection, because their agenda affects the letters that they choose. And so I just had three different little snippets that I found interesting. So this was a letter, the Princess Victoria to the King of the Belgians, and that's her uncle Leopold, the 19th of June, 1837. I look forward to the event, her accession, which it seems is likely to occur soon, with calmness and quietness. I am not alarmed at it, and yet I do not suppose myself quite equal to all. I trust, however, that with goodwill, honesty, and courage I shall not, at all events, fail. And then in an extract from the Queen's Journal, Tuesday, 20th of June, 1837, she found out that day that the king had died in the night. Quote, since it has pleased Providence to place me in this station, I shall do my utmost to fulfill my duty towards my country. I am very young, and perhaps in many, though not in all things, inexperienced, but I am sure that very few have more real goodwill and more real desire to do what is fit and right than I have. And then there was an amusing anecdote from the day of her coronation. So she's in Westminster Abbey, in the middle of her coronation ceremony. She's on the throne, the crown is on her head, and all of the lords and peers are coming to kind of bow before her and offer their allegiance. And so this is an extract from the Queen's Journal, quote, all my train bearers, etc., standing behind the throne. Poor old Lord Rolle, who is 82 and dreadfully infirm, in attempting to ascend the steps, fell and rolled quite down, but was not the least hurt. When he attempted to reascend them, I got up and advanced to the end of the steps in order to prevent another fall. Oh dear, that poor man, can you imagine? There's all of this pomp and ceremony and dignity, and the poor man falls down the stairs. I can just imagine. All right, and then a couple more books. One book that I have just started is Queen Victoria by Lucy Worsley. 24 Days That Changed Her Life. I've just read the introduction and I'm just about to delve in, but I really like the premise of this, that Lucy Worsley decided to take 24 days in the life of Queen Victoria in order to get a better understanding of who she is. And I think that that's such an intriguing way to tell the story of somebody. And so yeah, I've just started this. Like I said, I just read the introduction, but I'm really looking forward to delving into this and understanding more about the time period and Queen Victoria herself. And then, since I've been reading so much Victorian literature, I had a few books from the library that are historical mysteries set during the Victorian time period. That's one of my favorite time periods to read historical mysteries from. And so this is the second in a series, and it's called Scandal Above Stairs by Jennifer Ashley. The first one was called Death Below Stairs, and the main character in this series is Cat Holloway. She is a chef in a grand house, and in this book, let's see, maybe I'll just read the back. Mystery of Stolen Antiquities has cook Cat Holloway once again setting aside her apron for the intrigues of the upper echelons of Victorian London. Priceless artwork has gone missing from a luxurious house on Mount Street, and Cat Holloway is called out of her kitchen to investigate thefts in the homes of Mayfair's wealthiest families. Soon antiques are disappearing, not only from the extravagant households of collectors, but from the illustrious British Museum. As the thefts increase in frequency, Cat calls upon her friend Daniel McAdam, who has already set himself up in a pawn shop on the Strand as a seedy receiver of stolen goods. When a man is murdered in the shop, Cat must use all of her wits to see that the thieves are caught and justice is done. I really enjoyed this mystery. I gave it 4 stars. This is a great series all around, and I've actually got the third out from the library to get into. So yeah, they're a great series. They're very evocative of the age, so you really do know that you're in the Victorian time period. Cat is an interesting character, and the other characters around her in the series are also really interesting. They're well written, good mysteries. I can recommend this series. So I also decided to play Victober bingo, and so I printed out my bingo sheet, and as you can see, I've already marked off 5 squares. I haven't got a bingo yet, but as you can see, I haven't even actually completed a book yet, and I've got 5 squares. So I'm just going to read you what my possibilities are, because these are great. Someone writes a letter. That's one that I've already marked off. Religious dispute, murder. Mysterious past is another one I've marked off. Dying from consumption. Miscommunication, an eligible bachelor appears. Slander ruins a reputation. A woman with hysteria. Someone courts their cousin. An ominous storm. Marriage proposal. Wedding in the last chapter. And I had a book with a wedding, but it wasn't in the last chapter. Scheming, I've marked off. An inheritance is at stake. Someone stays with their cousin. Someone tells a story, that's marked off. Someone faints. Quotes from Shakespeare, that's marked off. They quote from Shakespeare a lot, actually, in The Dead Secret. And no, actually in Shirley, they quote from Shakespeare. Love triangle, illegitimate children, references Robinson Crusoe. If I was reading the Moonstone, I could have marked that off because they reference Robinson Crusoe a lot in the Moonstone. A man inherits a large sum of money, and rich and sickly aunt or uncle. So I'm having fun seeing if I can do a Victober bingo. So that's my first week of Victober. What do you think? Have you read any of these books that I'm reading? Have you read Shirley? because I need some encouragement here to keep going, because I'm not really into this story yet. So let me know what your thoughts are on Shirley. Have you read any of these other books? Let's chat about that in the comment section below, and I'll see you for another video soon. Bye.